What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Arnies. We're two doctors that have been assigned to monitor Kevin Feige's heart because he's been a little stressed lately. I'm Matt Johnson, and I think this podcast is actually about to get a creative overhaul.
And I'm Austin Terry, and this is 100% the most self-indulgent episode we've ever done.
That's right, because on today's show, we're doing something a little bit different. We're not reviewing a movie or TV show. We're more so doing a deep dive into the troubled production of an upcoming production that has been so wild we thought it would be fun to go over the timeline and talk about it. That project, of course, I'm sure you've been hearing about it, is Daredevil Born Again. A project that started development in March 2022, got a ground-up complete overhaul in September 2023 after Kevin Feige watched the footage that was done so far. We don't know his specific thoughts, but he fired the writing and directing team, so I think we can guess. And now it's a completely different animal altogether. So let's take a look at what happened today. I don't even know if we need to do a real, you all out there know. You guys know what Daredevil and Wilson Fisk have been up to lately. All we really know about, the premise or the log line they're using, and this will probably change too with another overhaul that we're going to get next year. But Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk are actually trying to put their rivalry and darker alter egos aside to help the people of New York, only for their pasts, of course, to catch up to them. But I just kind of want to move on and get right into it because we have a lot to go over. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into this timeline, Austin. I want to know first, though, what are your thoughts on the 3 seasons of Daredevil over on Netflix overall? And what have you kind of heard, / how do you feel about the Disney Plus reboot in general with Daredevil Born Again?
Yeah, I think I follow the general public sentiment for the first 3 seasons of Netflix on Daredevil, and that they're great. All 3 of them have things to love. Seasons 1 and 3 are definitely the best. The first half of season 2 is great, and then it kind of falters a little bit. But, I think the main thing that stands out is the casting for everybody in that Netflix series is perfect. They nailed it with Daredevil, they nailed it with Fisk. Foggy Nelson and Karen Page are great. And then is there a more perfect casting than Jon Bernthal as the Punisher? I don't think so. So all of that is perfect. Moving into kind of the MCU things, I think that's where things have really faltered for me, particularly with Kingpin. They've really, to me, it feels like they've really changed his character since he was in the Netflix thing. So that kind of leads into my troubled thoughts for Daredevil. Given what we've seen with Hawkeye and Echo, I'm really concerned that they're kind of going to try and tone down the tone of that show and what they established with Netflix. Originally, it was going to be TV-14. It looks like they're more now willing to lean into it being more mature. That said, so what they've done with Fisk is kind of the most troubling thing to me. The more I've thought about it since we watched Echo, I'm worried they're really going to try and kind of do that MCU thing where they turn the villain into a likable guy, and they've kind of made him feel like your crazy, wacky uncle so far in what we've seen in the MCU. So I think that's what I'm most concerned about heading into Daredevil Born Again. So all that to say, I love everything Netflix has done with Daredevil, and I'm pretty nervous for what Marvel's going to do when it is on Disney Plus officially.
Yeah, I'm with you on the first 3 seasons of the original show. Love it. Still love it. It's my favorite of kind of those Defenders, those 4 shows. And then, of course, I guess you can count The Punisher and Defenders, the actual show Defenders, the miniseries. But yeah, Daredevil was always my favorite.
What about Iron Fist?
I did watch both. I did watch both seasons. Season 2 wasn't too bad, but yeah, lots of bad over in those shows, but a lot of great. And yeah, Daredevil was very consistently good. I'm with you on the season 2 second half thing. Other than that, I think it's pretty stellar. I've rewatched bits and pieces over the years since originally watching them, and I still love it. Still get a big old kick out of it. I remember being so stoked in the theater for Spider-Man No Way Home when Charlie Cox popped up for a little cameo. Kind of got me amped that, you know what, maybe this is possible. Maybe we're going to get full-on more Daredevil. Is it going to be a movie, a show? I don't know. I just want to see more of him. And I was so excited when they announced this new show. And then pretty much ever since that announcement, I was getting more and more terrified until finally they did this creative overhaul. And we're going to talk about it, but it's just so crazy seeing what changed in the overhaul because it's baffling that those things weren't in place originally.
Yeah.
We're talking cast members, we're talking tone, we're talking about pretty big things that they just recently changed.
We're talking about seeing Daredevil in costume.
Yes, yeah, which is a novel concept apparently. I've definitely liked the Kingpin stuff more than you guys, but I still totally see what you're saying. And for the first time, I think I am curious, maybe not cautiously optimistic, because I don't really know how they go from the end of Echo with him wanting to become mayor. Of course, also at the end of Echo, she seemingly takes some of his pain away. So kind of to your point, Austin, like, are they kind of setting up Fisk to be, like, maybe not a good guy, but, like, a bad guy trying to be good? I don't know. Like, we don't even really know if he's the main villain. Are they going to, like, come out with, like, some surprise man? I don't know. But so I'm kind of with you there. So there you go. There's kind of our initial thoughts. I think post-overhaul, I'm feeling way more optimistic and super excited for this show. Normally, this is the part of our show where we would drop a spoiler warning. Obviously, we're not talking about a project that's actually out, so we won't do that. So that's good for you because you can keep on listening.
Yeah, before we move into the main content, I think I got to know, are you thinking or hoping we'll see Cousin Biscuits in the Daredevil show?
I'm hoping. You know I'm hoping. Man, what a character. I kind of feel like Cousin Biscuits and Foggy Nelson could have become buddies. So before we get to our timeline here, let's do some cast and crew talk like we normally do, Austin. Let's at least go over the people that we know for sure about.
Daredevil Born Again will be showrun by Dario Scardapane. You may know him from The Punisher, State of Affairs, and the Amazon Prime show Jack Ryan. The premiere will also be written by Scardapane. The directors that have been confirmed so far for the show are Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who you may know from Moon Knight, Matt, your favorite show of all time, and Loki Season 2. They are taking over the directing duties for however many episodes the show ends up being. It's unclear if the previous directors will retain credit or how much of their work will stay in the show when it finally comes to streaming.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting kind of a... We'll see. I'm curious about that. As for our cast, of course, we have Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, Daredevil, Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, John Bernthal is back as Frank Castle, the Punisher, and some new faces. We have Margarita Levieva as Heather Glenn, who is described as Matt's new love interest. Michael Gandolfini as Daniel Blade, a character supposedly super close to Kingpin. Sandrine Holt as Vanessa Fisk, actually replacing Eileen Zur, who played the role previously. I don't know if there was like a scheduling thing or what happened there. Who knows?
Eileen was great for Netflix.
Yeah, I know. Nikki M. James as Kirsten McDuffie, who apparently is the DA with a playful relationship with Murdoch. Artie Frauschen as Buck Cashman, who's an eco-terrorist of sorts that's tied to Kingpin. And of course, those were the people that we knew about before the overhaul. The big thing is now that the series has had this infamous change, new cast members have been announced, and much to fan delight, they are returning cast members that were somehow not going to be part of the original 18-episode series. And that, of course, is Deborah Ann Wall returning as Karen Page, Eldon Henson returning as Foggy Nelson, and the great underrated Wilson Bethel returning as Dex Poindexter, a.k.a. Bullseye.
And I did also see that Tatiana Maslany from She-Hulk did an interview recently where she said, still waiting on a call for Daredevil, and I don't think that call's coming.
Yeah, I think that's one that I would like to see, actually.
I would too.
Like a few episode arc. It would be fun to see the inverse of that, where maybe she comes to New York and they do a case together or something. Like, that'd be fun. It would be weird, like, to not address it at all, I feel like, but I guess we'll see. I mean, if they want to do a complete creative overhaul, I guess they have to acknowledge that, like, there are some things that we just cannot address. You know, we have to tell our news story. So we'll see. I'd like to see it, though.
I think anything from Hawkeye to Echo, with Secret Invasion included in that timeline, Marvel would just prefer in general to not address.
Yeah, I'm sure Kevin Feige wouldn't mind that.
I mean, we touched on it, but it is crazy that Karen Page and Foggy Nelson were not even thought to be included in the original draft of the show.
I think they were saying that, like, both Fisk and Matt were not blipped, so they were around for that 2019, 2024 5-year gap, which is probably how Fisk gets out of prison because of stuff like that, post Daredevil Season 3, and how he's, like, trying to build up the tracksuit mafia and those people that we saw in Hawkeye and stuff like that. But what everybody seemed to agree on, that, like, they were hearing, is that Foggy Nelson and Karen Page were referenced and that they were killed off screen by Kingpin, and, like, part of the, like, dynamic of the hero villain thing in the show was that that's why Matt's going after him. And it's like, doesn't that kind of spit in the face of the amazing Daredevil Season 3 ending where, like, Matt has that badass fight scene with Bullseye and Kingpin. He beats both of them, and as he's like beating Kingpin's face to a pulp and considering killing him, he says that you will go back to prison. You will not hurt my friends, because Fisk is like, I'll never stop hunting them. He's like, you will not hurt them. He takes his mask off, looks him in the eye, and says, because if you do, I will go after your wife and prove that she like orchestrated a murder. And then you're going to tell us in the reboot, Fisk just somehow killed them off screen even though Daredevil was around? Like, what happened?
And then Daredevil was not going to be in costume at all, and I guess just prosecute him in court.
Yeah. Bizarre choice. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for all the returning people. I love the interpretation of Bullseye from the Netflix show. So excited to see that. As for the new people, I'm excited about some of these like little descriptions we're getting. So I'm curious to see some new players in this little universe here. So let's just get into this timeline. The way we're going to do this, guys, bear with us, is I just kind of went through and did a little research, pulled all the big hits that kind of stood out to me. And, some of these we'll just literally say them and keep moving. But, we're going to kind of stop as we go here whenever we want to talk about stuff. So I think it's going to be a fun conversation. And you know what? We've always said the Arnies' number one goal is to educate. So now you'll know and be fully caught up with the turmoil of Daredevil Born Again.
There's definitely a gap in our public education system, and we're here to fix it. We're here to fill that gap.
We're here to fix that. All right. So whenever I was first putting this together, I was just kind of considering starting in like 2022 and just doing the Born Again stuff. But then as I started to look back at kind of the previous era, it made me realize, I guess Daredevil never really fully had it put together. Like, maybe they made 3 great seasons, but it was never easy. And so I thought that was a good place to start because it kind of, that vibe carried over into the reboot.
Maybe we should have gone all the way back to 2003 with Ben Affleck.
I thought about it as a joke, just to like have it start with 2003. Ben Affleck plays Daredevil. So here we go, guys. October 2012, the start. The film rights to Daredevil and the other Defenders characters revert back to Marvel from 20th Century Fox, meaning those characters could be used in the MCU. Hooray, says fans everywhere. Between October 2012 and October 2013, Drew Goddard, probably well known for Cabin in the Woods, pitched a new Daredevil film to Marvel, but they turned it down because of it being R-rated. After conversing more, they realized it didn't really make sense to give a street-level character a $200 million budget film. This led to the initial conversation to give Daredevil and these Defenders characters TV shows instead. I mean, without those TV shows, I don't know if you get all the Disney Plus shows. I don't know if they would have thought to do that. Who the hell knows?
It is still wild to me that 11 years ago and still today, Marvel is still scared of making R-rated content, even though their comics are violent. Like, it's crazy to me that they're like so scared to go that far.
Yeah, and with stuff like, like we said, Echo was the first TVMA thing, and it sounds like with this creative overhaul and like that coming out, they are, I guess, on board with doing that now. They created a whole, I think it's called the Marvel Spotlight banner. Sounds like that's where they're going to put the more, TVMA stuff, and I say, why not? I'm excited they're kind of diversifying in that sense. Yeah,
I still think they could do more of it, though. I mean, Echo was TVMA, but not really. I mean, it seems like it was mainly that for language.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, as we know, the only Marvel MCU movie we're getting this year is Deadpool 3, and that's the first movie that's going to be R-rated, so there you go. But yeah, funnily enough, Kevin Feige was not pleased with the idea of doing these TV shows because he wanted to incorporate the character Daredevil specifically into the MCU films, but because at the time he was only the president of Marvel Studios, like the film division specifically, and not yet the chief creative officer for Marvel Entertainment as a whole like he is now, the Superior shot him down and ordered him to focus on the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy instead. Moving right along the same month, basically right away, October 2013, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist series are announced for Netflix, which would ultimately culminate in a miniseries with the Defenders. Remember that? That was bad.
This announcement, I remember being so hype.
I was so excited. I remember walking through like college campus at night with like listening to a podcast, and I was like, "What? Really? I love Daredevil. Ben Affleck, my favorite actor."
Is he coming to Netflix? I thought him and Jennifer Garner were divorced.
Oh God. Also, I thought was interesting, a couple months later, because I forgot about this, December 2013, despite initial disagreements over the use of the character, Drew Goddard is back, and he was hired to showrun the series. The first season was based on Frank Miller and John Romita Jr.'s classic 1993 miniseries Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. Even though the R-rated film idea that he pitched was turned down, they did decide, you know what, for TV, we'll do it. We'll do TVMA.
Yeah, Netflix is like, we don't give a shit. We'll put out that R-rated content.
Exactly. But, I was like, oh, that's funny, Goddard's back. But why did I remember him being there? And here's why. In May 2014, Goddard steps down as showrunner to direct, drumroll everybody.
This is so funny to me.
A Sinister Six movie for Sony. And of course, I mean, if he had made that and it was just bad, that would have been one thing. But as we know, we never got that.
That never happened.
Nope.
And I was actually reading about this before we hopped on.
Yeah, that's right.
He was going to have Spider-Man ride a dinosaur in that movie.
Oh my God. Well, what's funny about that is at least Drew Goddard was going to make a Sinister Six movie that had Spider-Man in it. I don't think Sony can do that now. They're trying.
Back then, Sony was allowed to have Spider-Man, but if we fast forward to today, they're making a Madam Web movie and can't even reference Spider-Man.
Now they're making a Sinister Six movie with Venom, Morbius, I guess Kraven.
Jamie Foxx.
Michael Keaton from the MCU that accidentally fell in a hole and ended up in the Sony universe. But who are they fighting? Not Spider-Man. We don't know.
Madam Web.
Yeah, I guess. Is she a good guy? I don't know. But yeah, so he left to do a movie that never happened. And Stephen S. DeKnight, who if I recall, he was tied to Spartacus at the time. He takes over showrunning duties. And then right away, May 2014, our boy, Charlie Cox is cast as Matt Murdock Daredevil, and he was the studio's first choice, so they got the person they wanted. And then to kind of finish the casting conversation, soon after, in June and July 2014, the rest of the cast is confirmed, including, of course, Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk Kingpin, which I remember popping for at the time. It was like, whoa, okay, that's pretty big. Yeah,
this was such a great decision by the casting department. I mean, they picked two. I feel like Charlie Cox at the time was definitely more unknown.
Yeah.
But then to anchor him with Vincent D'Onofrio, I mean, what a way to have two compelling hero-villain dynamics to carry your show. I mean, they truly nailed it. And from the first episode, it was very clear, like, these two were perfect for this project.
Yeah. And it's not surprising that, like, every time one of them pops up, you're always eager to see, like, the other one walk into the scene. And we haven't gotten that until this show. I mean, we've seen like them individually pop up in projects, but you're like, the anticipation has been so good because seeing them on screen together in the show was like always such a major highlight.
Or unfortunately, you see sometimes Kingpin pop up in the Hawaiian shirt and you're like, what are we doing here? This is weird.
And I liked Hawkeye, but I still think that clothing choice, I'm still baffled by that. that was something. All right. So moving on, in March and April 2015, Jeff Loeb and Charlie Cox confirmed that if the shows were successful and people liked the characters, they could cross over with the MCU films. So this next couple blocks here I find very interesting because this is kind of the start of the whole conversation about these
canon versus not canon.
Right, these Netflix shows being canon or not.
And it's wild to me that even the cast was confused. Like, they would do interviews and say, yeah, we're in the MCU. And Marvel, like, executives at the time were like, well, we don't know. So it's crazy that no one, like, had a clear understanding of if they were actually going to carry forward into this giant, broader universe.
Yeah, it's very weird. So then, like, kind of jumping off that point, in April 2015, the big release, Daredevil from Marvel's television and ABC Studios, premieres on Netflix and is quickly renewed for a second season. So going off your point, Austin, it's important to remember that it was confirmed at the time that the show and the other Defender shows are in the MCU. Again, is Kevin Feige out there talking about that and saying that? No, but based on the things I'm about to say, it's like, well, I guess it was, because characters are directly referenced, Iron Man, Thor, Cap, all those people. The events of the Avengers are specifically called out. They're in New York, and they are like talking about the devastation that movie left behind. And places like Avengers Towers are seen. So why there was a question of retconning or making the show canon later is kind of odd in hindsight when it was already in the MCU, just, I guess, not called out constantly. I don't know. Like you said, it's a whole big confusion for everybody involved. But in terms of quality, it has a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes and was considered a universal, like, major surprise.
And this was still the era where Netflix having their own content, it still feels new and fresh. So this is like the height of binge TV, where Daredevil Season 1 drops, and in a weekend, the public has finished it and cannot stop talking about it.
Great point. Yeah, it is weird to think about that. I mean, I always forget, like, when did something like House of Cards premiere? Like, it wasn't...
2011.
That. Yeah, okay, so it's not like that long before that. And especially, like, we weren't getting constant Netflix original shows or movies at this time. So you're right, it was a big deal. But yeah, so soon after, the show premieres, they confirm a Season 2. And I talked about like kind of like going back through this timeline. I can remember where I was at specific instances for specific times, like hearing like news. Or I remember seeing like the first photos of Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio and being like, oh my God, it's gonna be so good. I will never forget being doing study abroad in London, and I was listening to a movie podcast one day after a class. And when I saw this news, this was like a major jaw drop. I could not believe it. So June 2015, Jon Bernthal is announced to be joining season 2, and not just joining. He is going to be in a main role, and not just any role. He's playing Frank Castle, the Punisher.
And this was, like you said, jaw drop, because Jon Bernthal is coming off of portraying Shane in The Walking Dead, another kind of angry, havoc-causing character. And it's just, you can't help but think they nailed it. And the only thing you can think is, I cannot wait for Daredevil Season 2.
Yeah, exactly. They knew what they were doing with that cast announcement for sure. So here we go. About a year later, in March 2016, Season 2 premieres. Tonight, and okay, so here we go, guys. This is what I was talking about. It's funny to note that Daredevil Season 3, you may not know this because it is very consistent, 3 different showrunners over 3 seasons. So the whole, like, changing showrunner thing is nothing new for old Daredevil. But yeah, so tonight doesn't return as showrunner, and first season writers Doug Petrie and Marco Ramirez get the job. It gets an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes. Obviously, this is still high praise, but the first half that focused on the Punisher was considered to be more intriguing and better handled than the second half with Elektra and the Hand. And
this reception, of course, leads to the standalone Punisher show.
Right. And again, talk about like quick announcements. They were jumping on it, Austin, because like you're right. A month later, they're like, you know what? We're not just going to do another season of Daredevil. Our plan was to do Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and then that becomes the Defenders. But let's just do a Punisher show, and it won't even really tie into that stuff. That's how popular it was. So that was huge at the time as well.
And it is crazy all these years later. Even though Jon Bernthal got 2 seasons of his own show, appeared in multiple seasons of Daredevil, it still kind of feels like they wasted him. Like, it's still, like, you look back and it's like, man, they had a perfect casting, and we really haven't seen much of him. Like, to me, it still feels like he should have played a much larger role in all of the Daredevil stuff on Netflix, and then also the MCU.
Yeah, it's like he was like one of the main characters in the first half of that season, and then he shows up a little bit here and there as the season goes on. And then, yeah, you're right. He does get 2 seasons of his own show, but I'm kind of with you. It's like, maybe it would have felt different if he had a recurring role in season 3. I remember being a little bit surprised that he didn't come back at all for season 3. But yeah, I'm with you. Who knows? Kind of a weird choice, but he's coming back, so let's hope they don't waste him. So jumping ahead, October 2018, season 3 premieres with Eric Olesen becoming the showrunner. It gets a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. So this is considered a pretty big step up from season 2. Sounds like you and I both agree with that, as I know the general public does too. And there's very high praise for the return of Kingpin in a leading role and the introduction of Bullseye. Upon the premiere, here's where things get interesting. The series and those involved were already planning a 4th season and had done extensive pre-production work. Season 4 would have introduced a new antagonist, with the 5th and final season being about the final confrontation between Daredevil and Kingpin. So when this season comes out and does gangbusters for Netflix and, everybody involved, the plan is what they expected. We have a hit show in our hands. This is like multiple seasons in. So obviously we're going to do season 4, right? Let's start working on it.
And I remember because the second half of season 2 was much worse than the first half, there was kind of that apprehension for season 3 of like, has Netflix lost it? Can the show keep its legs? And then when season 3 came out and it was so good, it's like, okay, we're probably going to get at least 2 more seasons of this.
Yeah, it's also important to remember that the reason there was a big gap there in terms of what I was talking about for between like season 2 coming out and season 3, because season 2 was just like basically 1 year after season 1, and then it went 2 years for season 3, like 2.5 years, I guess. I didn't mention, of course, the fact that in between that time, Daredevil did play a lead role in the Defenders miniseries. But to your point, it's like the reason I think maybe some of us were apprehensive is like season 2 definitely kind of falters as it goes on. And then the next time we see him is Defenders, which I can't really, like, I'm not being hyperbolic. That's a very bad show. It's very bad. I can't believe they bungled that one. I mean, that was going to be their Avengers for the street level heroes, and they really ruined it. So kind of to your point, it's like Daredevil wasn't thought of as like an amazing thing at that time, especially going from season 2 to that. And so I think there was kind of a general air of, did the Marvel Netflix shows, are they kind of losing steam? So I remember being like very happily surprised when they announced that season 3 was indeed coming.
And at the time, the MCU is kind of reaching its peak.
Yeah,
so there is
true.
Conversation of, should Netflix be handling this character? Is like, maybe if this was a truly Marvel project, maybe they could do it better.
Yeah. And maybe, I guess maybe they agreed, because despite in October 2018 when the premiere comes out and everybody being excited for season 4, 1 month later in November 2018, the series is unfortunately and officially canceled by Netflix, to the surprise and disappointment from the cast and crew as well as the public, I'm sure. And then interestingly enough, kind of the rights tied to Marvel TV and all that stuff prevented Charlie Cox from appearing in anything as Daredevil for 2 years once they canceled it.
And I remember this news being shocking because you're still binging, like coming off of that binge of season 3. It's fresh in your mind. Yeah. And then you're expecting news on who's a potential villain for season 4 or things like that. And instead it's just not happening anymore. Like none of this stuff is happening anymore.
And I don't think we fully know what kind of all happened there, because I don't know if you remember, but there was that very weird time. It was like, even if you didn't love the other shows, I love Jessica Jones season 1. I love Luke Cage season 2. Iron Fist season 2, I actually think is pretty good. I know most people didn't watch it because season 1 was such kind of a colossal fuck up, but season 2 pretty good. So, and the Punisher stuff I enjoyed as well. But there was so I guess what I'm saying is, despite how much you like those shows, it was like kind of like a sad time, I bet, for like the cast and crews, because once they canceled Daredevil season 3, do you remember kind of that weird like trickling effect? Because then it's like Jessica Jones season 3 still had to come out because they shot it. But it's like they already knew, well, I guess the writing's on the wall. I guess we're just going to release this and a month later we'll get canceled, which is what happened. Same with Punisher season 2. It's like everybody's so excited. It's been so long. It comes out a month later. It gets canceled. And like, so each like new season would come out after Daredevil got canceled. And then, of course, they just all got canceled. It was like, this is just kind of sad. Like, should I even watch these seasons? Like, I know it's not going to go anywhere.
And I remember reading interviews with MCU executives getting asked, like, are your characters coming over? Is that why these are canceled? And it almost seemed like there was this, like, disdain is a strong word, but it seemed like there was this disdain for the Netflix projects of like, oh no, that's separate. We would never touch that stuff. That's Netflix's thing. We're doing our own thing over here. Those characters will never come in the MCU.
Yeah, and it was that weird thing where it's like, once they got canceled, I remember places like Hulu were like, well, we'd like to pick it up. I can't remember exactly. I think it had something to do with Disney Plus, kind of maybe affecting that, because it's like Netflix became the place for Marvel TV and ABC Studios productions, but then Disney's like, well, the way that we kind of did TV previously was through our connection to ABC, but now we're going to make our own streaming service with Disney Plus. So I think that's maybe what slowly led to like those shows being canceled. And then, of course, they were removed from Netflix entirely. And, of course, later we were happy that they came over to Disney+. But I guess the advent of Disney+ maybe is what led to these being canceled. I don't know.
Well, and I think before, like when these shows originally went to Netflix, Disney didn't own Marvel yet. So the fact that this hyper-violent thing is now under the Disney umbrella, it was almost like there's zero chance we'll see this again because Disney doesn't put out violent stuff.
Right, especially at the time, yeah. So I mentioned that, rights prevented Charlie Cox from appearing in anything as Daredevil for 2 years, and this was November 2018, right after season 3. So it's perfect. Let's jump ahead 2 years. So June 2020, we're talking about like who's going to pick up these shows, what's going to happen, do they go to the MCU? So it sounds like in June 2020, Kevin Feige finally got his wish. We talked about initially his plan once Daredevil reverted back to them. He was like, this is perfect. I love Daredevil. I need it in the MCU. But since he wasn't in charge, they were like, no, focus on your Avengers and big stuff. We'll put him on TV. But now, in June 2020, Charlie Cox is contacted by Kevin Feige directly to talk about future appearances in the MCU proper. And that led to, of course, in December 2021, Kevin Feige publicly confirms that Charlie Cox will reprise his role for Marvel Studios after the character's surprise cameo in Spider-Man No Way Home. And it is a good point, Austin, because it's like here we are in January 2024. And in terms of Daredevil content, I know we're very excited for the future, but it's like we got that cameo, and then we get another cameo years later in Echo. Like, we've seen way more of Kingpin than we've seen of Daredevil. So we've had to wait a while. We got that little intro in 2021. So I guess, probably like 4 years later is when we're finally going to get like a main Daredevil show where he's finally the lead, not just doing a cameo. So also, funnily enough, talking about Kingpin, the exact same week in December 2021, Vincent D'Onofrio returns as Kingpin in Hawkeye, confirming the characters would return in the future of the MCU as well. I know we kind of have varying thoughts on that show, but I remember the fact that it happened in the same week was cool because even though they were small roles, it was kind of that thing we're talking about. It's like, oh shit, so if they're both back, that means we're going to get them on screen together sooner rather than later. It's not just one or the other, which was exciting.
And then I think here is when the speculation starts of, could a Daredevil show happen on Disney+?
Exactly. So here we go. Let's like kind of full board dive into the Daredevil Born Again side of this thing here, this timeline. So March 2022, Daredevil and the Defender shows are removed from Netflix after Disney regained the television rights like we talked about. And this led to Disney Plus introducing new parental controls, actually, so that more mature content and TV MA shows could be on the service. That same month, Production Weekly includes a Daredevil reboot and their report of upcoming MCU projects in development with Kevin Feige and Chris Gary as producers, and this marks the start of initial development.
And I think this is where it starts to come out that a Daredevil show would be TV-14 instead of MA.
So a couple months later, the reboot is confirmed to be a series in active development. It hasn't been officially announced, but it's kind of like one of those open secrets, I guess you could say. And it is going to be a show. It's not going to be a big movie for the both of them. It's going to be a Disney Plus show with Matt Corman and Chris Ord attached as head writers and executive producers. They decided to give the series an episodic structure and lighter tone compared to the Netflix series. It also sounds like they were heavily exploring a TV-14 project, like you said, as opposed to TVMA. And this is something that I don't think we're ever going to know the answer to. And obviously, I know Kevin Feige's an insanely busy guy, and he's an executive producer on all these things, but it's obviously he has to invest his time in certain projects more than others. I mean, there's no way that he could be the main creative force in all of them. He's, I think, just there when he can. That said, the guy that loves Daredevil this much, always wanted him in the MCU, I am genuinely surprised. I'm not shading on him, but it's so you signed off on doing basically a Law and Order style show, which is, I mean, he's a fucking lawyer, I get it. But it's you wanted to do a long season. It's not going to be TVMA. It's going to be episodic. Are you sure? I'm kind of surprised that he signed off on that.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this at the same time they were talking about a potential She-Hulk show, also saying it'll be an episodic Law show. And both times I'm just thinking if I wanted that, I'd watch Law and Order. I want to see superheroes doing superhero things. It seemed so strange to me at the time. It just felt like they were being different for the sake of being different.
But that's also the weird thing. Is I get it. How do I word this? It's I guess it should have been one or the other, at least to me. I really like She-Hulk Attorney at Law. I enjoyed that show. I thought it was a blast. I thought it was so fun. But it's you pitched that as your Law and Order show. Great. So then why Daredevil that comes later? Why are you aiming to do the same thing? It's why not just do a season 2 of She-Hulk? Then why are you doing 2 Law and Order style shows in the MCU?
And did they really think after 3 straight seasons and multiple spinoff appearances of seeing Daredevil be Daredevil, and then have to wait multiple years, that fans would really be excited just to see him be a lawyer? That seems like a terrible idea.
So kind of in connection with that, in July 2022, the title was revealed to be Daredevil Born Again. This was the official public announcement that everybody might remember when Kevin Feige brings them out on stage. It's said to be an 18-episode first season, which we're talking about jaw drop moments. When he said 18 episodes, I was excited, but also why? That's a lot. And they said it's just a first season with Cox and D'Onofrio returning. At the time, Cox said the series was a whole new thing and not a 4th season to the original Netflix series. It was later revealed that the 18 episodes would be split into 2 9-episode halves, I guess, so it's not quite a season 2 situation, but there was going to be a divide somehow. The long season was expected to be because, like we said, the series was episodic and would almost be a Law and Order case of the week type situation.
Such a weird plan.
Despite our feelings on that, I think we were still kind of excited at the time. And it was probably because we were wearing Matt's famous rose-colored glasses where we were just that I don't agree with that personally, but I'm excited our boys are back. I was still excited. But then,
Marvel, projects are starting to falter a little bit here, but Marvel still has a lot of goodwill too at this time.
Of course. But I've kind of been separating this timeline as we've been going into chunks. And I would say this next section is where it truly becomes a shit show. So here's what happens, guys, in case you forgot, because this happens quickly. So the pre-production's done already. After that announcement, they've done the work. So it's been about a year since they officially started development. So March 2023 rolls around. We've done the work, and now filming begins in New York. So 3 months later, June 2023, filming halts in accordance with the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike. And then in September 2023, just another few months go by, Daredevil Born Again is publicly said to be undergoing a creative overhaul. Another jaw drop moment when I read that. I'll never forget that one either.
A year and 2 months since they announced it.
Yep. Marvel Studios made the decision and fired head writers Corman and Ord and also let all of the initial directors go. 6 of the 18 episodes had been filmed. I don't know if they were completed, but I guess to a watchable degree. The Hollywood Reporter said that Marvel Studios executives had reviewed the footage so far and realized that Born Again, quote, was not working. Corman and Ord's episodic take on the series was said to be a large divergence from the Netflix version, including that Cox did not appear in costume as Daredevil until the 4th episode. Corman and Ord were expected to still be credited as executive producers, which is good. I mean, they should get their credit. But this kind of ties in Austin. That's the end of the shit show on the timeline that I was talking about. But I don't know how you felt at the time. It kind of reminded me of Solo a little bit. If you kind of think about like Kathleen Kennedy's role in Star Wars at that specific moment in time, and you think about Kevin Feige's role in Marvel at this specific time, it makes you like, because this whole thing with Solo is like, we basically filmed the movie. Here we go. You know, Phil Lord, Chris Miller, they hand them a movie, and like Kathleen Kennedy's like, oh my gosh, this is too goofy.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of like, well, yeah, you've seen our work. We pitched it to you. We told you what we were going to do, and you could have been reviewing the footage this entire time. We finished the movie. You don't like this? You knew what you were getting. You hired us. And then she was like, no. Sorry, you're fired. We're going to redo the entire movie. And then it becomes a failure box office-wise because of it. But that's kind of how I feel here, because it's like, you wonder, Kathleen, what were you doing? Like, you should have been like more up to speed. I wonder the same thing with Kevin Feige. We talked about, that's weird that he signed off on this take on Daredevil. And then whenever you see like a year later, like a year and a half later, they're like, oh, creative overhaul. You're like, well, yeah, of course. Like, I guess I'm glad that you're doing it, but still it's like, how did it take this long? You shot like a third of the episodes? Like, yeah, this sounds like we knew this was going to be a recipe for disaster already.
And 2023 is the year where Marvel kind of has to reckon with their total TV strategy.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of reporting on this where if you think about the MCU and their films, you get directors and you get these writers, but really the people who are in charge of how the story flows is the Marvel producers and executives who say, this, and this has to happen because there's this other project down the road. Whereas when you make TV, it has to be really kind of writer focused. And they tried to take their movie approach into their TV shows. And the only one that's like really well received is WandaVision. And that's 2.5 years ago at this point. So they're having to kind of have a reckoning and decide, how do we want this TV structure to work? And they were trying to kind of go against the grain of how TV is traditionally made. And around this time is when they're starting to realize maybe we need to start kind of running TV shows like TV shows instead of running TV shows like MCU projects.
I think, of course, with their TV division, it also just became quantity over quality. I think probably Kevin Feige and the people involved just like, we're starting to lose a little bit of control. I mean, you're churning out this many TV shows. It's like you're not going to be able to be that involved in all of them. So it's like whenever you put out that many and a lot of them get mixed or negative reviews, it's like, well, now the goodwill's starting to go away. And I think we could probably say fairly that Daredevil Born Again and Echo to a degree were kind of the culmination of that, where it's like they at least realized it before release. They were like, we've been doing this for a few years now to middling results with TV. And then it was like the boiling point. Like Kevin Feige's like, we cannot fuck this one up. We got to stop. We got to stop and fix it now. So I think this is going to be a big moment looking back on, and like whenever Marvel, the MCU is done one day, we're going to look back on like, this is whenever they decided to get their shit together on the TV side.
Well, the other key thing here is Secret Invasion. There's been a lot of reporting on that where production kind of blew up. People were quitting. Actors are starting to not get along with the crew behind the scenes. They were starting to run into timelines of actors having other commitments and maybe not being able to continue the show. And the way Marvel always makes their movies is they film everything, and then when they decide things don't work, they bring people back for reshoots, and that's where they fix it and then stitch their movie together to send it out to theaters. And that's worked for them for years. But moving into TV takes so much longer to make that you start running into obligations, and you can't fix things in reshoots. So I think Marvel and Kevin Feige are starting to realize we have to be more involved during production of these shows, or we're just going to start running into more and more mess ups, and our stuff's going to keep getting poorly received.
100% agree. And I think the thing you mentioned that kind of sticks out too when talking about this is like them trying to take their movie strategy and put it into TV. Whenever this blew up with Daredevil Born Again, it was also, I was shocked to learn that there was some reporting that, you know, whenever they were like, okay, we got to change and do this more like TV, we have to have showrunners. I remember hearing that and being like, what the fuck do you mean? You don't have one guy or gal with like a creative vision, like spearheading the show? I was like, that doesn't make sense. And it turned out there were people like credited as being a showrunner. I think probably the most famous example is Michael Waldron is credited as the showrunner for Loki. I guess at least like Loki season 1. And then Eric Martin, I want to say was his name. I'm sorry if I'm wrong there. He was the guy that did season 2. And whenever season 2 came out, it was then reported that Eric Martin was one of the head writers on Loki season 1, and Michael Waldron, the showrunner, so to speak, actually left midway through production, which this was never said, so that he could go write Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness because Kevin Feige asked him to. And then Eric Martin just secretly took up the duty. So it's like, they didn't have showrunners, they were crediting people, but these people were really just the head writers. And it's like, writers are great, they're important, but these are not always people that are kind of that, firm, put your foot down director type that's kind of like leading the charge and kind of saying no to certain things, but then saying yes to certain things. So we talked about the head writers of this show, the ones that were fired. There was no showrunner. They were the ones that were like tasked, like, hey, you're writing the show, but you're also like steering the ship, basically. It's like, that's a weird move. So this also marked the change where they were like, okay, going forward, we are going to have, that showrunner in addition to writers. Weird that they were like, oh, I guess we don't need that, but it's good that I guess they're changing that now. But let's get into the final portion of the timeline here, guys. This is kind of basically the start of what we know about the actual overhaul itself. So, October 2023, Dario Scartapane, known for writing The Punisher previously, is hired as the showrunner. We already talked about how, the previous writers were not the showrunners, which is, again, still strange. But yeah, so Scartapane is going to be the showrunner, and he's also going to be set to write new episodes in addition to writing a new pilot episode, which is interesting. But he's also tasked with kind of writing new scenes specifically to fit in with the pre-existing footage that they deemed they could use. So we'll see how that kind of works out. At this time as well, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, known for Moon Knight and Loki Season 2, got one win in there, one miss, were hired as the new head directors. The new team decided to ditch many of the previous ideas and change the show to have a more serialized structure, shorter episode count, and be more directly connected to the previous Netflix series. A lot of people behind the scenes, including some of the cast, have kind of switched their tones. Like, however, like Charlie Cox previously had been like, well, this is a whole new thing, not season 4. This has like kind of been openly called, this is season 4 now. So yeah, D'Onofrio said that the main creators of the series got together and decided that Born Again should harken back to the tone of the Netflix series, as well as continue storylines from it.
Which is also like, duh. Like,
Yeah,
why were you
right?
not planning to do that originally? It worked on Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of the whole thing. And I guess we'll maybe talk about it a little bit later, but it's like, I know we talked about it at the beginning, but it's important to, I guess, acknowledge, I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier, but in the initial show, it sounds like they just weren't really going to reference like events of the Netflix series. It was just like kind of move forward. And I think it was because at that time they were like, this is not MCU. That show is not MCU canon. We're just going to keep the actors and not really reference it and tell our own story. So that was their choice. And after the overhaul, after Echo, they were like, okay, let's just say that that was MCU canon now and move forward. Again, weird choice. But anyway. Oh, yeah. So prior to the overhaul as well, the following actors were part of the series. Clark Johnson as Cherry, Sabrina Guevara as Shella Rivera, along with Michael Gast and Mark Geller and Harris Yulin in undisclosed roles. It was unclear if any of these actors would be included in the new direction of the series, but we will see. So then jumping a little bit more forward, we have January 2024. Marvel Studios head of streaming Brad Winderbaum acknowledged that previously Marvel Studios had been a little cagey about what was part of their sacred timeline and canon to the MCU, kind of like I already mentioned. Apparently there had been a corporate divide about what Marvel Studios had created and what Marvel Television had created. He continued that as time had passed, Marvel Studios had begun to see how well integrated the Marvel Television stories are, and personally felt confident in saying Daredevil was part of the sacred timeline and MCU canon. Again, a quote that makes me laugh. It's like, actually, recently we just started to realize those stories are pretty good. That was 10 years ago, idiot. How did you just realize that?
We kind of realized, like, hey, people like this Netflix stuff. We didn't know that.
Did you hear that Daredevil was on Netflix before this? It was pretty cool.
You guys know that John Bernthal plays the Punisher?
Yeah. He's like, oh, I thought Charlie Cox was new to this role. So yeah, Marvel Studios began looking at the Netflix series as a more integral part to the MCU after the creative overhaul started, and then with Echo's release, all of the Netflix Defenders series were retroactively added to the MCU Disney Plus timeline, with Daredevil placed alongside the Phase 2 content of the MCU between the Guardians of the Galaxy films and Avengers Age of Ultron. And then also in January 2024, big one, with the writer's strike and creative overhaul complete, filming on the series gets to finally resume after 7 months. Original series stars who are not part of the original version of Born Again, Deborah Ann Wool, Eldon Henson, and Wilson Bethel, are finally officially confirmed to be in the show now.
And there have been set photos that have come out recently showing them all together. So, I mean, they're out there filming.
So cute. All right. So I guess technically that is the end of what we know now. I did throw this on here because I thought this was interesting. So looking ahead to the future, January 2025. So pre-overhaul, we kind of know now, I guess, after the overhaul, like kind of looking back, we're kind of seeing like reports and like certain things get published or whatever. But basically it sounds like the original plan was this show would have released January 2025. But they still are seemingly maintaining the idea, especially now that the series is shorter. They do have pre-existing footage. It is still planned for 2025, but obviously it's going to be much later in the year. So let's keep our fingers crossed because I don't want to wait too long.
The only thing I can think of with like multiple different people's footages and different directions and all that kind of trying to be stitched together, I just can't help but think of 2017's Justice League, where how that feels like two different films. Like when you watch that theatrical cut, like it's so clear that so many different people had their hands in the pot making that project.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a fair concern. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. It's like they're not like fully like reshooting everything. They are reshooting a lot, but it's like, okay, so how are you going to stitch it together? Because that's definitely, not easier said than done.
And especially the part where it says they're keeping existing footage. In my mind, I'm like, start from scratch. And I'm not a TV maker or anything like that, but I feel like you just start from the ground up if you've got a whole new team in there.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully it doesn't feel too jumbled. Hopefully they don't get a Justice League situation, like you said.
Justice League.
All right, guys, so that's the timeline. I know that was a long one, but I think there's tons of interesting shit in there. Before we close out, we're going to do kind of like a little random grab bag discussion. There were certain things I could have added to the timeline, but I didn't want each individual, kind of entry to be too long. So I just kind of threw on some random things that we kind of know. Maybe some quotes there, and then some other just random tidbits that might be good and we might be excited about.
So we've gone through all that. Of course, we know new direction, all that. Cast members we love coming back. What do you think you're most excited to see?
I am glad that the trio is back. I don't think it's going to be for as much of the series as maybe some people hope. I think Deborah Anwell was only confirmed for 3 episodes of the series. But still, just to get that trio back together, I'm very happy about. I thought the ending of season 3 with them kind of cheersing and bringing Karen officially onto the Nelson Murdoch team as Nelson Murdoch and Paige was super cute. A perfect little ending. I'm excited to see where they are because, like we said, I mean, a lot of time has passed in universe. I guess if that was 2019, I guess 6 years maybe. So I want to know what's been going on now. I guess I could maybe even phrase it that way. I'm very curious now that the overall has happened and they are going to be more directly referencing Netflix stuff. I'm curious what little tidbits they'll throw in kind of through dialogue, what's been going on in these 6 years. Has anything cool happened? Have any villains resurfaced or anything like that? So I'm just excited to hear kind of what's been going on. I guess technically some of the flashbacks in Hawkeye, whenever he was operating as Ronin, kind of gave us some insight to what Wilson Fisk was doing off screen during the snap, but kind of on the flip side of your coin, I'm curious, this is the show. This is the most screen time he's going to get so far. Will they acknowledge what happened to his empire, how he got out of prison again? It would have been during the snap. Was there some weird loophole through the snap that it's he can leave now? And then how does he maintain his empire? Does Vanessa, his wife, get snapped? Does that change him? I feel this could be a good opportunity to explore some of that because since this is a weird continuation thing, they would have to maybe acknowledge what's happened since the last show, and that the main thing would be the snap. So we'll see. I know you and I are kind of always curious about that, and we never really get it. I'm kind of resigned to the fact that we probably won't, but I think this could be a good opportunity to address some of those factors.
It could be a really cool opportunity to truly make this show feel ingrained in the MCU, and then also kind of show MCU fans something new that we haven't seen addressed. It could just be a really natural fit for this character.
Because, I mean, we talk about kind of the TVMA. There's certainly a lot of more mature themes and you could explore during the snap. So I don't know. We'll see. Kind of going on the TVMA point. I just liked this quote, Charlie Cox. This was actually when he was talking about the show being TV-14 instead of TVMA, and he kind of supported the initial decision to make it TV-14 and kind of the lighter tone. He thought that they could still be faithful to the character. But he did say he is a fan of the more mature storylines because he likes it being TVMA since they can explore Murdoch's Christian guilt, his age, and promiscuity with women because everybody knows Matt Murdock in the world of Marvel is like a genuine slut. Like he gets around. We've seen him get around in the show as well. But this is one of the reasons I'm excited that it is TVMA, not just for like violence or anything like that. I know the original show it could be very violent at times, but it was really the themes and the tone, like the more mature things they were exploring with, like, you know, sex and like, I mean, we haven't even talked about it at all, but one of my favorite parts about Matt Murdock is like he is this like hardcore little Catholic boy, but he is doing what he's doing, and kind of the whole like confession nature and his religion makes for a very complex and interesting character. So I think we can actually explore some of those because of the decision to change the rating.
Yeah, and they didn't shy away from it with the Netflix show. They dove headfirst into all of the Catholicism. And then from the little we've seen of Matt Murdock in the MCU, we've already seen him be promiscuous. He dove right into She-Hulk. So, you know, they're definitely continuing that trend even with it being TV-14.
All right, another quick one that I'm very excited for, and this, you know, kind of continues the trend that we were talking about. It's like, really? You weren't going to bring back Foggy Nelson? Or just like a random example of like, what? The original decision didn't involve that. I'm also surprised that pre-overhaul, Philip Silvera was not the stunt coordinator, but after they ended up hiring him to do all the stunts and kind of the choreography and fighting, which is great because he did it for the Netflix series, so he's back.
And that is good news because the choreography in the Netflix series was so sweet. I'll never forget that they kind of kicked off that trend of hallway fights, and there's so many iconic moments that stand out from the action in the Netflix series.
All right, so I wanted to throw that quick one out there, but I did want to end here, Austin, with probably the most like substantial not thing in regards to the show. I mean, if it ends up happening, it's pretty cool. But, you know, as we know, a lot has changed in regards to the structure of the show. And it sounds like there's been some reports here and there that when it comes to like kind of the serial nature of the story now, they may actually be taking a page from one of our favorites, Andor, and using the arc structure. Because, and I guess where this report kind of initially came from is people were like, it's interesting that Deborah Ann Woll has like been confirmed to be in the show now. That's great. But only for 3 episodes. Again, we don't know how long the season is. If it's 10 episodes, like, I don't know. Wilson Bethel, wow, he's back as Bullseye. That's great. Only 3 episodes. Okay, that's interesting. So this is kind of leading people to think that they might be doing arcs, which I think would be super cool. So Wilson Bethel, like I said, confirmed for 3 episodes. And it sounds like it's going to be about him coming back post-paralysis to take down both Fisk and Daredevil. But the one that we got to spend a little bit of time here because it's really cool sounding. The one that we know the most about is the Punisher arc that would see, of course, John Bernthal back. It's being called Revenge of the Punisher. Simple, sweet, love it, clean.
Great name.
And it would be about Fisk utilizing the police for bad, because apparently his whole thing here, kind of in order to get, I think, Mayor, one of the things he's going to do is double down on, like, getting rid of vigilantes, because he states he hates his old friend Daredevil. But yeah, so one of the ways he's going to do that is pretty fucking dark. He's going to utilize the police for bad by getting them to don the Punisher logo and go out and commit violence. So obviously Daredevil is like, that's not good, I got to stop that. But unbeknownst to anybody, this would actually lead to the reemergence of Frank Castle himself, and he's going to be giving the cops a beatdown because they're using his logo for evil. And even though Frank's not evil, he's an anti-hero, so he can kill evil people. But I think that's just a cool premise.
Yeah, it's very cool. And we all know Frank Castle has his own kind of code that he operates by, and that definitely is not part of that code. So a lot of people, I think, will be getting shot in the head by Mr. Frank Castle.
Whenever you're asking what I'm most excited for, if they end up doing like an Andor-style arc structure, that would be the thing I'm most excited for.
Especially if they tie it to villains. Because that could really make it feel like a comic book series. Like you have this kind of mini arc with a villain, another villain, maybe an overarching theme throughout all, but that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it sounds like for sure if it's like 4 arcs based on lowering the episode count, you would get one that is definitely Punisher focused and one that is definitely now Bullseye focused. So that could be really cool. But also like in terms of like another like little thing I'm excited for, I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier. It's like, because, you know, you talking about, you know, we love John Bernthal as Punisher. In the grand scheme of things, we didn't really see like a crazy amount of him. The last we saw him with Daredevil was him like kind of helping Daredevil defeat the Hand a little bit after Elektra dies. And so they end on decent terms, but, you know, it's very easy to see that they could fall back into their old, like, disagreeing ways, still kind of supporting each other. But that's another thing I'm excited for is, like, what is the relationship with Daredevil and Punisher now? In, like, the 6 or 7 year gap, whatever you want to call it, between, like, Daredevil season 3, like, has he seen Frank at all? Has he seen him? Or, like, was it the last time was at the end of season 2? I don't know. So I'm curious what their relationship will be like. I'm sure it'll be exactly what we want it to. Is it's like, It'll be buddy-buddy when they can, but probably like trying to stop each other from killing people at other times.
And I know I keep going back to this, but what was Frank up to during the snap?
Yeah.
He's a vigilante with the strict code. What kind of stuff was he seeing and dealing with?
Yeah, and it is interesting because John Bernthal has been confirmed since before they changed things up, but I don't know if he's only going to be in 3 episodes. I think people assume he might have a bigger role, but it could have been just since they confirmed him before they changed everything. He might have always been planned just to be in a few episodes. So we'll see. I have no idea the extent of what his role will be. But I'm sure John Bernthal's happy, because I remember it took him a long time to sign on because he was not happy with doing a TV-14 version of Punisher. So he probably he was like, fuck it, I'll do it. The fans will like it. And now he got his wish. So he's got to be happy.
Yeah, I'm just glad he's back. If this is the last time we see him, at least we kind of get a send-off. If there's more space for him in the MCU and what Kevin Feige has planned, I mean, I'll take any amount of John Bernthal in my life that I can get.
All right, well, with that, thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss our upcoming content. Also, please share us with your friends if you enjoyed this episode. We really would appreciate that to continue to grow our show. Please leave us reviews as well. Even if you want to write anything, leaving us a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever your podcasts really does help us out. At the Arnies is our social, and the Arnies.media is the website. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode.
And everybody, we do want to hear from you, so please message us on Instagram at the Arnies or email us thearniesmedia@gmail.com. What do you think of everything going on with Daredevil Born Again? Is this show cursed? Are you still excited for it? Anything you say, we'll read on the show and react to it live in our latest episode.
That's right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this one. Have a great rest of your week. See you next time.
I can't wait to see Daredevil be a lawyer.